13 of Super Rugby has started today. We have 4 South African games, 3 tomorrow and 1 on Sunday. Our sport editor Garen and chief writer Rob are joining me yet again to let me know what their predictions are. Hopefully they get more right than last week. How are you guys?
How are you doing, Jen? Very
Good.
Well, thanks.
Good. I didn't actually mean that. I think you only got 1 wrong last week.
Yeah, no, we've been pretty good in the last couple of weeks.
Not always the case.
Garen, why don't you take us through the first match that's happening tomorrow?
Okay, so the first game from a South African point of view is a big match. It's the Sharks on their 3rd match of their overseas tour. They're in Christchurch against the Crusaders, who've won the tournament 7 times.
Oh, jeez.
Not an easy match at all for the Sharks, coming off their defeat to the Brumbies last weekend. They really need to get back on the winning trail, but a difficult place to visit for sure, Christchurch. The Crusaders, from their point quickly, they're missing Israel Dag and Kieran Reid, so those are 2 big losses for them. I think just the absence of those 2 gives the Sharks a chance. I don't expect them to be nearly as bad as they were last week. It was one of the worst games, I think, from a tournament point of view.
Yeah.
They lost to the Brumbies, very uninspiring rugby. I expect them to be better. We've got Yanni du Plessis and Beestam Torreira playing their 100th matches, so something to play for there for sure. I'm sure the Sharks will be up for this game. Jake White, I'm sure, would have had stern words during the week for them. Like I said, they can't afford to lose too many more games. They've got teams right behind them in the log that will overtake them, and we've spoken many times about how important it is to finish in those top 2 spots in the log to guarantee a home semi-final and then hopefully a home final. So the pressure is definitely on the Sharks. I'm going for, unfortunately, the Cheetahs the Crusaders to win.
I was going to say, the Cheetahs
not Cheetahs, no. The Crusaders to win, but I think it will be very close. I think, the Sharks will pick up a bonus point for losing by fewer than 7. I'm going to go for the Crusaders by 4.
All right, Rob, do you agree? Are you going to turn your back on our South African team?
No, I've gone exactly the same as Garen. 4 points. 4 points in it. I think that the Sharks will be right up for it. I think that, Bismarck du Plessis said after their last match that they did need to go back to the drawing board to some extent, which was a concession that something's just not quite right about their template. So I do expect to see a bit of a shake-up, some sort of, hopefully some renewed sort of mental energy as much as anything going into this game, although there are still some worries about people like Frans Steyn, who's been overplayed a lot by the Sharks, partly because Pat Lambie's been on the croc list for so long now, and of course that meant that somebody as versatile as Frans Steyn has had to, when he's not been in that very important number 12 channel, has had to do the fly-half duty. And of course last week he had a bit of a shaky game, so hopefully he comes back into his own. I think if Frans Steyn is really up for it, then the Sharks will have a sniff. History says that they're very unlikely to win. The Sharks haven't won in Christchurch in Super Rugby, so it shows you the obstacle they're up against. I'm a little doubtful, Garen, about Willem Alberts being shifted to number 8. It kind of tells you that they're still going to throw a blunt instrument at the Crusaders. So we'll have to wait and see how the strategy evolves on match day. But yes, I agree with Garen that I think they'll put up a gutsy show, but just not quite be able to knock over the Crusaders at their old bogey ground.
All right. Well, you both seem very confident in your picks for the first game. Garen, why don't you take us through number 2?
Okay, the second game I'm not so sure about. We've got the Stormers at home against the Force. The Stormers, bottom of the South African conference, bottom of the overall conference, against the Force side that's been really impressive this season. They're flying high in the Australian conference and in the playoff spot in the overall conference. They've just come off a very good victory in Bloemfontein on their first tour match against the Cheetahs. Now they're back down. Well, they're down in Cape Town. On paper, you'd think that the Force should win. They've got a settled side. They haven't made many changes this season. They're playing some really good rugby. On the flip side, you've got the Stormers at home. We've talked many times about how much this home ground advantage counts. The Stormers team on paper is certainly one of the weakest and worst teams I've ever seen. The bench is really, really weak. If they pick up any injuries to their starting 15 early in the match, it's going to be a real struggle for those coming off the bench to fit in. Got a controversial selection of Peter Grant back at fly-half. He's played fly-half, inside centre, fullback, and back to fly-half this season. Hasn't been that spectacular in any of those positions. Kurt Coleman, who played last week, although in a losing effort against the Bulls, was really, really impressive. I would have liked to have seen them given more of a chance at number 10. But Peter Grant, in his 100th game as well, that needs to be remembered. The Stormers teams tend to get up for when their teammates are playing such important milestone matches. So it's a bit of a coin toss, for me, this game. I wouldn't be surprised if the Force win, at all. On the flip side, like I said, the home ground advantage for the Stormers. I'm going for the Stormers by 1. but I wouldn't be surprised if they do lose.
Stormers by one.
1 point.
All right, Rob.
Half a point if I could give it to them by that.
Rob, are you as undecided as Garrett is?
No, I'm gonna be a little bit braver than he is even. I'm going Stormers by 3 points.
Come on.
So still incredibly tight. And I say this with no special confidence. But it's funny, Garen, because you remember how at the start of the season you would have looked at a Stormers Force game fairly late on in the season and thought, well, that's a game that the Stormers could target for a sort of easy win, on the assumption that the Stormers would be fairly high riding on the table and that the Force would not be contending this year. Instead, things have happened completely in reverse. The Force are the ones who are fighting really hard for a playoff spot. They're in an excellent position to do that. And the Stormers, of course, are just playing for pride, even with several games left in the season. So it's almost an unbelievable situation. And I just wonder if a little bit of sanity isn't going to sort of be restored, and that the Stormers will actually manage to pull this one out. I still think that teams can't take for granted coming to Newlands and winning. I'm not sure what the size of the crowd will be like. The Stormers beginning to lose, obviously, a lot of their faithful, because people we've seen in the past how you'll get 40 or 50,000 people at Newlands when the Stormers are on a high and heading towards the playoffs or the semis or something. And of course, that's not happening this season. We know that they're in a very experimental phase, a real time of transition, and the gates have been, giving some idea of the sort of disillusionment that's been happening in the Cape Town public. So that home ground advantage, perhaps not quite as much of a factor as the Stormers would normally anticipate, but I still think that they might just do it.
All right. Well, I hope you guys are right on this one. All right. Why don't you take us through game 3?
The third game, you got the Cheetahs up against the Brumbies. Now, I know Rob and I are going to disagree on this one. I'm not sure why.
Because chocolates comes from that.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to be correct on this one. You got the Brumbies visiting South Africa for their first match. We saw last week that the Force in the country, it didn't seem to matter that they arrived for their first game. Didn't take much acclimatizing. The Cheetahs were pretty woeful, to be said. They conceded tries at will in the end. I think the Brumbies team are even better than the Force team, and I think their structures are far superior. Their defense is really, really good, and they've got a lot to play for. I think by the time the match takes place, the Sharks will have already lost to the Crusaders, and the Brumbies will look at the log and go, if we win this match, we're going top of the log. So that'll be extra motivation for them. The Cheetahs, I'm sure, will be better than they were last week. But last week the Brumbies were too good for the Sharks. The Sharks certainly a better team than the Cheetahs. When I do all the maths, there's only one winner for me, and it's the Brumbies. And I'm thinking they could win by as many as 10.
Oh,
so
wow.
That's my prediction.
Rob, are you going to disagree?
I'm going one of my infamous gut feels.
Okay.
They don't always work for me, but I just have a little feeling that the Cheetahs are due for one of those really rousing home games where the old Harley Davidsons get revved up at the start of the match, and the Cheetahs come out smoking, as it were, themselves. So I've just got a feeling that they might be able to do this one. I think it could be a reasonably high scoring game. I don't think the Cheetahs will abandon their sort of hard running philosophy. They will go for broke, and they will simply try to sort of outscore the opposition. I am worried, of course, I agree with Garen, that the Brumbies defence is pretty well organised, so the Cheetahs may well get turned over a few times, and of course that could spell bad news, because the Brumbies will counter very effectively too. But the Cheetahs are capable of winning. I still think that there's a little bit of a duel going on at the bottom of the table between the Stormers and the Cheetahs. Neither of them wants to have that sort of bottom slot, although we've said before that we think the Lions might be the ones who eventually end up sort of bottoming out the South African Conference. But there's a good little sort of rivalry there between the Cheetahs and Stormers to try to lift themselves a little bit off the foot of the table. I'm bravely going to say Cheetahs.
All right, and then loser brings in chocolate on Monday.
It's probably me.
It's a deal.
All right, Garen, take us into Sunday.
Okay, so there's a Sunday game this weekend. It's the Waratahs up against the Lions. It kicks off at 8:05 South African time. A little bit unusual, so if you haven't had a late Saturday night, wake up early for Sunday morning's game. It's the Lions' third game on their tour. They were very unlucky last week, even a bit of controversy at the end, to lose their game against the Highlanders. But I think that's the closest they're going to come to winning a match on this tour. The Waratahs, looking at them, they haven't had the greatest season, but they're still within a shout of a playoff spot. So I expect them to be too good for the Lions, especially in Sydney. It's that third week on tour, which is notoriously the toughest week. Now, the Lions have left New Zealand. They've made the trip over to Australia. I don't see them winning. This match could get quite ugly. Got Israel Folau playing for the Waratahs. He's the leading try scorer, line breaks this season. They've got really fantastic attacking potential, the Waratahs. The Lions a bit iffy at Folau. Is it Marnot Boshoff? Is it Elton Jantjies, our first choice? They got some doubts over there. I expect them to scrum well. They've really scrummed incredibly well this season, giving them credit there. But the Waratahs, I think, will be comfortable winners, 16, 17 points, somewhere in that region.
Okay, you're confident.
100%.
You seem pretty confident there, Rob.
No quirky predictions for me on this one. I'm with Garen. You have to go. The smart money certainly, flashes at you. Waratahs. It's very unlikely that the Lions will win. I think they'll be pretty disappointed after having the game, really sort of almost snatched from them when they were set for a really famous win against the Highlanders. So the Waratahs will be sort of very aware that they can't, be complacent. But, we've mentioned the Lions' strong scrummaging ethic, but of course the Waratahs also pride themselves on a big, heavy pack. They've actually brought big Will Skelton, the 21-year-old, 140-kilogram second rower, back into their side. And that tells you that they're going to try and fight fire with fire in the scrums. And they should, frankly, be capable not only of holding their own against the Lions' scrum, but possibly even dominating it. And that takes away quite a lot of the Lions' strength and sort of traction, if you like. So it's very hard to see the Lions winning it. I think they'll play with their usual passion. But I think they'll lose it by, you said 17, did you say, Garen? I'm going to go about 12.
Well, the two wise men have spoken. Why don't you let everyone know, Garen, how they can follow live updates on Sport24 and share any photos they might take?
Right, sure. We will be doing our live updates this weekend on all the 4 South African games. Head over to sport24.co.za. If you're going to be in Cape Town or Bloemfontein for either of those games, please send us your pictures. We'd love to include them in our gallery. And head over to Super Brew and challenge us with your predictions.